one of those days you look forward to, and then you're surprised when it gets here. Amen. We're going to jump back into 2 Kings 4 today. I've been going over this beginning of 2 Kings, paralleling Elisha and Jesus. We started chapter 4 last 2 weeks ago now. Thank you for Pastor Phil for filling in for me. We're chapter 4. Most of the commentaries call chapter 4 the rewards of faith, because it's several stories of Elijah coming in and doing miracles and helping those who were faithful. So a lot of commentaries will title this chapter the rewards of faith. This section we're going to be looking at today is split up in two parts. I prefer to call this one the trouble with grace. The trouble with grace. We started off last week, you may remember, or 2 weeks ago, and we compared a little bit with that woman, that widow who had the faithful husband who had passed away, and we compared her a little bit with Job in that time when she was remembering when it was good with the Lord. And that theme is going to continue on a little bit today. If you want to go back and study it on your own, please feel free, but just the parallels of this story in the book of Job are pretty evident. Let's start on verse 8. And it says, "It fell on a day that Elisha passed the Shunem, where there was a great woman, and she constrained him to eat bread. And so it was that as oft as he passed by, he turned in thither to eat bread." So we got to set the scene. We've got to describe what's going on here on both a spiritual level, and I'd like to look at maybe some of the background a little bit on just a human level, because we're starting this story where Elisha's dealing with this woman, and Elisha didn't start going up to this woman. This woman came up to Elisha. And we want to start out with really seeing this woman as the picture type of the church and how she should be. We begin looking at her, how she's described to be a great woman. And there's a lot of Jewish history about this woman. She's supposedly the sister or some family member of Abishag the Shunammite that warmed David's bed back a while ago. She's supposedly the mother of Edo the prophet, if you remember who he is. But at this point, she's a great woman. She is a woman who is the head of a house that is prominent. She's what Proverbs 31 would call a good, wise woman. I'll read that. I love this description, so you don't have to go there. I'll just read it. That this woman is a woman where the heart of her husband doth safely trust in her. That this woman is one who, I can't get here and not read it. The heart of her husband doth safely trust in her, so that he shall have no need of spoil. She will do him good and not evil all the days of her life. She seeketh wool and flax, and worketh willingly with her hands. She's like the merchant ships, she bringeth her food from afar. She riseth also while it is yet night, and giveth meat to her household, and a portion to her maidens. She considereth a field, and buyeth it, and with the fruit of her hand she planteth a vineyard, and on, and we see this description of faithfulness and diligence and affection, so much so that the husband knows that he can trust her to run the household, and it's not the way the world would do the pejorative Christian 1950s woman who just has to stay home and cook meals and have kids and be barefoot in the kitchen. That is so outshined by the reality of a godly woman running a household. And that's what we have described here in this Shunammite woman. And if there's a human example I can give, y'all know me, I try to come up with some wacky examples, whatever helps you. No, but I want a picture type for this one. Everybody has one of these things, right? All right. Inside these things is a battery, right? It's never big enough. All right. But every day you charge the battery, and when you're a kid, maybe you might think that charging a battery is putting electricity into the phone. Who still thinks that charging battery is putting electricity into the phone? That's not what goes on when you charge your phone. No. All right. No, it's just a picture type, so just bear with me for a second. It'll come back. These are called lithium ion batteries. All right. No, that means because electricity isn't a thing. It's not a substance, it's an action. All right. So we've got two chemicals in there that get split up. And so one has positive charge and one has a negative charge. And so the using of the battery is that positive charge rushing over to the negative charge. And that rushing is what we call electricity. All right. So have you ever noticed when you buy a device and you start it up for the first time, it's usually charged between 50 and 80% of the time. All right. That's because the worst thing you can have is a battery that's full, what we call 100% charge. That's the most unstable it can possibly be, because that means all of the charges are on both sides and they both want to come at each other, and it's like in this state of complete unrest that needs to do something. Right? And the other end of the spectrum, if it's on zero, it's completely dead. That means all of those ions have come together and there's no more conflict to be resolved. All right? And so when you start out and you're full, you've got nothing but conflict and needs for lots of resolution. And it said it's most unstable when there has been none. And so they ship it to you between 50 and 80% because there's been some resolution and it's more stable. And then once you stabilize, then once there's no more work to be done, it's dead. All right. It's just an interesting picture type. When there has been no work done, it's most unstable. And when all the work is finished, it is least useful. All right. But it is most stable when work is getting done. All right. So just hold that in the back of your mind, because that's the way that thing works, and it's just an interesting picture type. But this is what we do in the human, because we live lives of complete chaos. You can say it that way. We constantly have conflicts that need to be put together. We even heard testimony today of a bunch of different types of conflicts that the Lord leads us through. We've got those big, overt ones, marriage, needing a partner. That's a conflict. And what do we do when we have that conflict? We seek it out and we try to solve that conflict. And we try to find a partner. And once you get married, that conflict is over, not ever coming back. And that's the overarching conflict. Now, in that conflict, there's a bunch of little ones. The little interactions, does he love me as much as I love her? And all of those things. Or once you get married, how you continually express love and respect and submission and all of these things, and how it gets daily walked out are constant, ongoing conflicts that need to be brought together. And so we've got these large overarching ones, and we've got these day-to-day activities. And a lot of times what happens is we will be solving our own conflicts, and we will solve our own conflicts our way. We're using different terms. We've used terms like morality and law and my own thinking and what standard you use. We've had many years of history of using those terms. I'm going to use it in solving conflict terms today. We solve conflicts daily, whether they be the just thoughts in our mind that are giving us anxiety, whether it's interpersonal conflicts, whether it's you're hungry and you need food, difficulty at work, needing a job, what am I going to do with my life, what am I going to be, we are constantly positive ion going to negative neuron and trying to solve all these conflicts and create some stability in the areas of our lives that are unstable. And we do this in many ways, and what happens a lot of times is that we'll read the Word, we'll listen to messages, and we'll get really encouraged, and we start going into the Word as a means of helping solve the problems that arose in the way that I solve my conflicts. That sort of help bring some peace to things that I messed up. Well, that's sort of not what's being described here. We're describing a household that was run in which the method of solving conflicts was done in a biblical way, so that the method of solving conflicts produced life. And that's what the church is designed to do. The church is designed to be, what's the order that we use in the New Testament? You get born again. You work out your salvation with fear and trembling, and you mortify these members, and you put on those members, and you do the work of an evangelist, and you do all of these things that are being obedient to the Word. And inside your life, you're just solving conflict. That positive is going over to the negative, and that conflict is resolved and added to the foundation stability of how my life is, and it grows and grows. And this happens in interpersonal relationships. This happens in your mind and in your hearts, and peace and stability. This happens with happy households. This happens with children being raised up in the way they should go. This happens with the fathers providing for the household, and out of the method of provision, there's an overabundance, and with that overabundance and fruitfulness, there's the need to do something with it. And so that's where we're at this point. We've got the faithfulness of a woman, we've got the faithfulness of her husband, we've got a household that is great, it's prominent, because it is one that has been honorable before the Lord. It's been diligent, and it's sitting on surplus of fruit and provision. And so having this surplus of fruit and provision, she needs to do something with it. And she knows that she's living in a town between two major cities. And there's this man of God that she's heard about that works in both of those cities, and he happens to come through my town in the middle of his work. So I'm going to make sure that the surplus has come from my obedient walk with the Lord, not my using the Word as a crutch and trying to help limp me along, but my obedience to the Word that's provided all of this overflow in my life. We're going to bless that man. And so it fell on a day when she's finally realized who he is. She's heard about this man of God that's walked back and forth, and she had to constrain him, hold on him to convince him, please come stay at my house. And she constrained him to eat bread, and so it was that as often as he passed by, he turned in thither and ate bread. There started to become a relationship between household and prophet. And verse 9 says, and she said unto her husband, behold, now I perceive that this is an holy man of God, which passeth us by continually. He was just the man that she was told was a man of God. And now she says she perceives this to be a holy man. And your testimony will always precede you. I remember I went to a Christian school, a very predominant Christian school, and did some work in some counseling centers around, mostly with kids. But I remember interacting with this one lady, and I was trying to remember this week what this lady's name was, and I can't remember to save my life. But I was interacting with this lady in one of my jobs, and she was asking where I went to school, and told her, and she was like, oh, those people. I don't have anything to do with those people or their God. And I was trying to figure out why. Usually, when you live in a town that has such a predominant church, it's almost like there's two towns living in one. There's ones that like the entity and the ones that are completely against it. No, and so obviously she was completely against it, and I'm trying to figure out why. Is it just, you know, angry at God because of her own sin, or no, what is it? And she told me this story about how a few years previous she worked in a hotel, one of the main hotels that was next to this school, that was known for its moral majority work. And she was the one that would check everybody out in the morning. And so she was the one that charged and knew which of the guest speakers, pastors, etc., watched which porn movies the night before, and then went on to preach their moral majority message. And so being the one who would charge and see what they watched and charge them, and knew the character of the men that were getting ready to go and preach all of this morality, she was like, they don't believe what they're preaching. I'm going to have nothing to do with it. Your testimony matters. You know, that people, if you're going to be effective in ministry, you're going to get close to people. And it doesn't really matter what you think about yourself. It doesn't really matter what testimony you tell people. Your life is a testimony. What you believe will come through no matter what you say. And at this point, she had believed that, well, he's said to be a prophet. He's doing God's work. I don't know him, but, you know, everybody says good things about this man. So I'm going to invite him into my home. And he kept coming back. And the relationship was built. And she started to realize that, well, no, this man's living what he preaches. The Spirit of God's on this man. I know him. How much more are we as the church? Oh, just in these two verses alone, just being the people that have been faithful to the obedience of the word, to the producing of an overflow with a need to provide. And that just the calling of the church. And we've not even really gotten into the story yet. And we've not even gotten into the rest of what goes on. And she's just like you or me. She's in that battery example. She's just going about. I don't know how many times during the day her suppliers of seed gave her a hard time and they wanted more money than they charged. And all of the little things of life she didn't like something her husband decided to do, or whatever, they all were happening throughout the day. These things happen. And the majority of the times, the conflicts we try to solve, and we try to solve them our own way, we know what the word says about a woman submitting to her wife and a husband loving his wife. How many times do we solve conflicts in a way that are the selfish ways we solve conflicts? We don't like something our spouse did, so we don't talk to them for a day. The old silent treatment. Or we see our kids disobeying, so instead of teaching and disciplining right, we get angry and hostile. Or no, we start blaming for not having enough instead of working diligently and working hard. We see all the problems, and instead of facing them and dealing with them in a way that honors the Lord, we just try to escape the problem. Well, that's not what was going on here. But how much do we do that? See, this is the positive example. This is the Job in the first chapter, who outwardly loved the Lord and did everything right, so much so that he made the sacrifices for his kids. Perchance they may have sinned. He covered all of his bases. This is the beginning. And she said unto her husband, Behold, now I perceive that this is an holy man of God, which passes by us continually. So we need him here longer. We need the Lord in our midst. We need to build up a hotel, if you will. We need to build up a prophet's chambers. We need to build up a place so that as he's going by, he doesn't just get food here, but he gets rest, and he gets a place to maybe study or write some letters, or he gets all of the So maybe even to pray while he's here, but this needs to be a place where the Lord inhabits this place because he's here. We need him, and we need the Lord. And I can tell now that I've known him for all this time that he's not just a good spokesperson. He's just not a paid speaker. This is a man who loves the Lord, so we need him here. So husband, and I remember on that Proverbs 31 woman, I'm not getting this done on my own. I'm saying, husband, please, can we do this? Let us make a little chamber, I pray thee, on the wall, and let us set for him there a bed and a table and a stool and a candlestick. And it shall be when he cometh to us that he shall turn in thither. And it fell on a day that he came in thither, and he turned into the chamber and lay there, and said to his servant Gehazi, his servant, call this Shunammite. And when he had called her, she stood before him. And he said unto him, say now unto her, behold, thou hast been careful for us with all this care. What is to be done for thee? Because the Lord blesses. The Lord's good. The Lord's, I picture this. He saved you. He made you his. New creation. The light in you that had gone dark has been lit again. You're a candle that's supposed to be set on a hill, shining bright. No, you're no longer dead. You've been made alive. You're not just darkness been made light. You're not just a dead been made alive, but you're also an outsider that's been made an insider. And now you're with him, and you've been healed, and you've been raised up, and you're living. And it's not just that, but he chose to put himself in you. See what's going on here. He didn't just fix you and put you over there. He rose you up, and he set you, he made you alive, and then he made you a place for himself. He made himself a place for himself in you. This is what he does. He doesn't just fix and send on. He takes the work of his hands and he blesses it. He says, she's done all this. She's invited him in. Oh, how much, even as evangelists, we don't like the way the modern church has talked about getting saved as inviting Jesus into your heart. That's just such a very childhood way of thinking of salvation. But at the same time, he comes into your heart and he blesses. And that's what he recognized. My wife loves me. I'm going to bless my wife. Not just going to bless my wife because I love my wife. Of course I'm going to bless my wife because I love my wife. But how much more do I want to bless her because my wife loves me? So he's finding out. This has been a place where he's come and eaten and survived off of the bounty of the overflow of this family, and now he's gotten a bed, and he's got to find out, what does this woman need? If I was to ask you that question today, could you be able to answer the same way she did? Well, how did she answer, Pastor? I guess we should read that. Behold, thou hast been careful for us with all this care. What is to be done for thee? Wouldst thou be spoken for the king? Do you have any legal problems? Do you have any social, political problems? Is the zoning on your land bad and needs some rezoning so that you can be more profitable? What's going on in your life that maybe you need me to fix in a way that you can't, because I've helped win a few wars, so I've got some favor with the king even if he hates me, and I can do something for you. Would you be spoken of to the king or to the captain of the host? Do you need some defense? Is somebody trying to mess with you? Do you need some home robbery defense going on? She answered, I dwell with my own people. I have need of nothing. Here I am. I'm providing for you because of the blessing that the Lord has given for me. He gave his word. He told me what wisdom was. He told me, he gave us this system of marriage and a husband and a wife. He gave us what we call a capitalist system. He gave us this idea of being a husbandman and a caretaker of the ground and growth and fruit, and how to be wise with money and how to bless others, so that we might both grow together. And we've not just got a household, but we've got a city, we've got a town, we've got people that look out after each other, and we take care of each other, and all the things you're talking about. I have no political ambitions. I'm not trying to be the debutante of the country. I'm trying to be faithful here, and he's given me a husband, and he's given me overflow, and that's what I'm blessing you with, prophet. I'm the one blessing you, prophet, remember? And so he says, okay. And he said, what then is to be done for her? She doesn't need anything. What can we do for her? And Gehazi answered, verily she hath no child, and her husband is old. And he said, call her. And when he had called her, she stood in the door. And he said, about this season, according to the time of life, thou shalt embrace a son. And instead of jumping up for joy, she says, nay, my lord, thou man of God, do not lie unto thy handmaid. She did not become an immediate atheist. She knows Scripture. She has not become well, it was a great while it lasted, but he just gave a false prophecy, so I guess he's no longer a man of God. She's not saying, you're a liar, I don't believe what you're saying. All right? We'll get into what she's saying in a minute, what the language is actually saying here. But let's go back to my battery example for a minute. We're talking about solving just daily things in life, the desires, things that come up in the world, sin that comes up in me, anxieties, thoughts that got to be taken captive, sin nature, lost, just all of it. And it's got to all be handled. And we have a tendency to, usually we have the ability to either handle things biblically, and the Lord's grace covers a multitude of sins, and we can have life growing, or we can handle it our own way. And not only then do we have the difficulty of the conflict, but then we have the consequence for the sinful way that I handle the conflict. Or we can just even look at that in the human, and we can go through and look at how the majority of all psychological disorders are the result of our body appreciating the bad way we handle conflict and learning that the bad way is the appropriate way, and then having to go back and start doing it the healthy way and teach our body and our brains that no, the first way you did this was harmful. So this is the beginning of a lot of psychological issues as well, this how we handle all of these conflicts. But then we've got this other type of conflict that isn't just, do I handle it godly or do I not handle it godly? Or am I dealing with the consequences of having handled it badly? We've got the conflict that is unsolvable. Anybody ever had some of those? That it's just, no matter what you do, there is going to be no resolution in this situation. And that lack of resolution in itself becomes a conflict and how you handle that. All right, so here we are. If you've noticed, the word says that she has no child. The word does not say that she was barren. All right. The language that she's using, she's saying, no, prophet, don't give me something that I know is going to die anyway. She's basically describing, I don't know how many times, I don't know the way this looked, all of the history doesn't give all these details, but this is not a barren woman who was unable to have children. This is somebody who's gone through miscarriage, and somebody who maybe even had stillbirth, or maybe even had children and they died early. But this is someone who's that promise of being able to be a mother and raise children wasn't just something that was kept away from her, but was an active source of grief and conflict because there had been time after time failure and sorrow and failure and sorrow. And so now she's old with her husband. And so she's done the conflict, dealt with this conflict the only way she possibly could. Grieve it, put it behind you, and move on. And so that's just sort of in her past. And so using our example of our battery, we've got all of the ions over there, and the conflicts are coming together, and the positive come and met the negative, and it turns into a neutral, and it's a stable foundation just moving on past it. And this is one of those that the way she dealt with this conflict, it's neutral and in the past. And all of a sudden this prophet comes in and plugs in her phone, and all of the ions go back. And now she's in the most unstable position of her life because she knows what she's experienced before. And now she's gotten not just the conflict of knowing, oh no, what am I going to have to experience in the future? Is it going to look like the past? But all the ways I've already come to terms with all of this no longer stand out. I have no more coming to terms with all this. It's no longer a neutral thing in my past that I had to grieve and get past. This is an active, present thing now. If there's one picture I can give you of the grace of God, that's it. Every way in your life that you believe that you've already accepted the death of the way the fallen flesh has to deal with things. And all of the life that you can hope for and long for, but you never really believe you're going to attain it the way you want and need to. You're dead men walking. Failure after failure, consequence after consequence. And God comes in, and He helps take care of the past. But His goal is not to help take care of your past. To bring life to your future. But to bring life to your future means you have to break free of all of the ways you have handled your past. And so grace is a troubling thing. You can read it this way. If I can get my bookmark. 2 Corinthians 12, starting in verse 8. Talking about that thorn in the flesh that he's been given, Paul. For this thing I besought the Lord thrice that it might depart from me. And he said, my grace is sufficient for thee, for my strength is made perfect in weakness. Conflict. Resolved finally the way that only he can resolve it. Instead of just the way that I have to deal with and manage my death so that I can both get as much out of it as I can and avoid as much pain of it as I can. But I get through something. But he's saying I'm not just getting you through something. See, you've had all of the overflow, young Shunammite woman, you've had all that overflow in the rest of your life that you've been able to bless with. My presence is going to come, and it's going to give you an overflow in an area of life that you've never been able to be blessed with. My grace is sufficient for thee, for my strength is made perfect in weakness. Most gladly, therefore, will I rather glory in my infirmities, that the power of Christ may rest upon me. Therefore I take pleasure in infirmities, in reproaches, in necessities, in persecutions, conflict that needs to be taken care of. Everything he needs to walk you through, but it's not walking you through something because it's just the consequences of fallen nature. It's the growing pains of having to walk through him and producing life in the middle of a fallen world that in itself cannot produce the life that he's producing in you. So I take pleasure in infirmities and in reproaches, in necessities, in persecutions, in distresses, for Christ's sake. For when I am weak, then I am strong. That's what she's saying. Nay, my Lord, I've been through this. I'm not that barren woman who's never been able to produce something. You're talking about that personal area in my life where there has been the most destruction in my life. And I've had to walk through that destruction alone, and I've made it to the end of my life, and I've come to be at peace that it's just me and my husband and all the others that I can bless, and we've got a city that works together, but I put this thing behind me. Don't make me walk through that again. Don't lie unto thy handmaid. And the woman conceived and bare a son at the season that Elijah had said unto her, according to the time of life. And thematically, we're about to switch. Thematically, we've gone from the church that is an overflowing church. We've gone from a time in the Garden of Eden. We've gone through a time of great blessing. We've gone through a time where the church is being the church, doing what it was supposed to be doing, having an overflow of provision and all that. And we're getting ready to deal with how God deals with the fall. In verse 18, so when the child was grown, it fell on a day that he went out to his father to the reapers, and said unto his father, my head, my head. And I have great empathy for anybody who has problems with their head. And he said to the lad, carry him to his mother. And when he had taken him and brought him to his mother, he sat on her knees till noon, and then he died. The very thing that she had cried out to Elijah for, don't give me something that's going to die. Because in her mind, this was the only possible outcome. Because this is the outcome that had happened every other single time for her. The question was, what's she going to do about it? Is this going to be like every other time when she dies a little bit inside, and how could God be so cruel to make me go through this again? Or how do you handle it when things go wrong in your life? When you're in the middle of doing something and you've read the word and you've had good counsel from pastors, and you've been in prayer and you've been obedient and you've been faithful, and then something just goes wrong. Or even, not even that, if you've been completely unfaithful, but you're in the middle of the grace that he's given you and still something goes wrong. Is it the fault of those pastors? Is it God has turned himself into a cruel, mean, bad God that just wants to see me hurt and suffer? How do you handle that? Is that the reason why all of the way you manage your house should just end, and all surplus and all life should just stop? Should your life end in trouble? Well, what does she do? She did humanly what we would probably consider to be rebellion. She hid his son's death from his father. She never tells the husband that his son is dead. I don't know if you noticed that. I haven't read it yet, but she never tells him. And then he died. Verse 21. And she went up and laid him on the door of the bed of the man of God, that prophet's keep, that Elisha's bed. She goes in and she gives him to the Lord. She goes in and puts her son on his bed, closes the door, knows this is a place that nobody's going to disturb him, nobody's going to accidentally find him and try to bury him. There's going to be no grief in this household until I meet with this prophet. And she went up and laid him on the bed of the man of God and shut the door upon him and went out. And she called unto her husband and said, send me, I pray thee, one of the young men and one of the asses, that I may run to the man of God and come again. Well, why would you like to do that, wife? Which is exactly what he asks. He says, well, it's not Sabbath. It's not the new moon. This is not the time when sacrifices happen. This is not when you normally talk to the man of God. Why would you want to talk to the man of God now? This is one of those places I prefer the Hebrew to the English. You'll notice that it shall be is squiggly, so we're going to ignore those words for the moment. And the word that's translated well is shalom. So he's asking why. Why do you want to go and talk to the man of God now when it's out of season to talk to him, when there is no sacrifice to be made now, when there's nothing to be done now? Why do you want to go to him? And her response is peace. I go to him because I need to go to him for there to be peace. It will be well. If I go to him, I will be able to find peace. And then she saddled an ass and said to her servant, drive and go forward, slack not thy riding for me, except I bid thee. So she went up and came to the man of God to Mount Carmel, and it came to pass when the man of God saw her afar off that he said to Gehazi his servant, behold, yonder the Shunammite. It's not new moon, it's not Sabbath. She lives way over there. This is 15 to 25 miles away. Why is she here? No, run now, I pray thee, to meet her, and say unto her, is it well with thee? Is it well with thy husband? Is it well with a child? In this picture, she completely dismisses the servant. Completely just blows him off completely. Yeah, it is well, and keeps going. Because I asked this question before, and I keep asking, when things go wrong, where do you go? See, at this point in time is not the time in the story when she needs to start falling in love with her God. Fortunately, in the story, we found out that happened in the beginning. She valued him and then recognized who he was and loved him and took care of him and had a place for him. And because she loved the word then, she pursues after the word now. In the time of your worst conflict is, well, it's both the best and the worst time to fall in love with the word. One, because if you haven't loved the word up until then, every time's the right time to fall in love with the word. But it helps if you already love the word. If the word is already the place you go, if the word is already the place that you start from, and it's not just one of those, I know that the word is technically true, I know this is what I'm supposed to be doing, but you love the word. And you know that in the word is life. And in the pursuit of the word and in the obedience to the word, and you know the God of the word, and you know you have bold access. I wonder how many people in this city knew that they could run up to the prophet like the Shunammite woman is doing. But she spent, it doesn't tell us how much time there is between verse 8 and where we're at. We know it's at least a year because she's had a kid, and then the kid was old enough, so we don't know how long between the first feeding and the prophecy of the child happened, but we're probably talking at least 7 or 8 years of the child growing up and being a young child. So they got to know each other. So, I don't know, 10, 15 years that they've known each other. There was a relationship there that she knew that this was a man of God, and there was an affection there. She knew she wasn't just doing the things that she needed to do, but her God loved her. So when there was something wrong, where'd she go? When there is this conflict that needed to be solved that could not be solved by her. Remember, the battery, the most unstable position of all is being in the middle of a conflict where there needs to be a resolution and you are not capable of making that resolution happen. So do you abandon it and say, God's a bad God for putting me in this horrible position? Or you run towards the throne room of the one who can deal with what he's put in front of you. The servant wasn't good enough. The servant wasn't even good enough to give a real answer to. He got blown off as she's running straight to the prophet. She answers, "Is well." When she came to the man of God when she came to the man of God to the hill, she caught him by the feet. But Gehazi came near to thrust her away. And the man of God says, "Let her alone. Her soul is vexed within her, and the Lord has hid it from me. He has not told me." I'm sure there's an entire sermon to be preached on the relationship between Elijah and God, and why God allowed Elisha to deal with this woman on the human level first, knowing that the spiritual level was being taken care of, as opposed to coming in as a prophet. I'm sure there's a message there. The humanness of the pastor, the humanness of Christ when he came down, the humanness of the one that helps bring somebody else to the throne room of God. That's the picture we've got going on right here. Then she did say, "Did I desire a son of my Lord? Did I not say, 'Don't deceive me'? Didn't I say, 'Don't give me something that was going to die anyway'? Didn't I tell you about all of my history, of all the times that I've tried and failed and death has come in? Didn't I tell you that this is the exact scenario? Oh, this child I wanted, this is not what I wanted to have to go through." How many things in life that are the direct result of being in just the fallen, sinful world, having to deal with the sin and death that's in you, that's in somebody else that you love, that's in the world, that you don't get to have life and affection without having to deal with the death and destruction of this world. You don't get one without the other now. In future promised land, by and by, then all death and all tears will be wiped away and gone, and it will be perfect. But now, he gives us life despite the death around us, and he walks us through it. But she avoided the life of promise so that she wouldn't have to go through the death of the world anymore. And God's saying the death of the world is not good enough to hold you back from the life that I would give you. It shouldn't be good enough for you to hold you back from what I would have for you. So then he said to Gehazi, "Gird up thy loins, and take my staff in thy hand, and go thy way. If thou meet any man, salute him not." Take some cues from this woman. I'm giving you a job. And don't stop and talk to anybody along the way, because you'll get distracted. It'll slow you down, and you've got a job to do. So take my staff in thy hand, and go thy way. If thou meet any man, salute him not. And if any salute thee, answer him not again, and lay my staff on the face of the child. It's a very confusing verse about why he would do this. I don't know if Elijah just thought that if his servant was obedient with his own staff, the power of God would work through the staff. I don't know if it's because God withheld what was going on and he was trying to do his job where he was at and take care of at the other time, or what was going on. But he sends Gehazi over there. And we'll catch back up to Gehazi in a minute. But then she does something. See, we have this tendency to look at the prophets in the Old Testament. We have a tendency to look at the Abrahams and the Davids and the prophets and all these things, and we do one of two things with them. We either idolize them so much that we treat them as if they're not humans. And so, well, they just did the special things, and I could never do the special things, and God worked through them, and God could never work through me, and I will appreciate all of their moral stories, and I will appreciate all of the other men of God in my life, but I know that's not for me because the God stuff is designed just for that special person. All right? That's fallacy. That's a wrong way of handling that conflict. then we do something, then we go to the other side of the spectrum, and we look at all of the parts of those scripture and how all of those people are stand-in for Christ for us. And instead of seeing them as a stand-in for Christ for us, we see them as a stand-in for us. And we start thinking that all I need to do is get the right principles and get the right 5 stones, and I can go and I can defeat the Goliath in my life, which is the big problem that's in front of me. Well, no, David was picture type of Jesus, and the Goliath was the picture type of the sin and death and destruction that he had to defeat on your behalf, and you are the Israelites that are sort of hiding and cowering over there, needing David to save you. So we either separate them from us completely, or we act as if that is the description of us and our super spiritual might. But we've got a man of God here. And she treats him the same way that he treated Elijah. Do we get that? Verse 30. And the mother of the child said, he's already sent Gehazi. Supposedly, the child's already going to be taken care of. How does she respond? The mother of the child said, as the Lord liveth and as thy soul liveth, I will not leave thee. That's every time he went out and he said, I've got work to do. You stay here, Elisha. As the Lord liveth and as thy soul liveth, I will not leave thee. As the Lord liveth and as thy soul liveth, I will not leave thee. So what does he do? He goes with her and goes right back home. Is this the degree to which you love the Word in your own practical life? In the middle of all of those conflicts that we talked about on all of the different big picture conflicts, little picture conflicts, minute day-to-day conflicts, internal conflicts, external conflicts, all of the conflict between trying to obey the Word and having this stupid fallen flesh, all of them, are they handled from the beginning place of, I love the Lord because he loved me, and no matter where he goes, I will not leave him? Is that where we start from? Is that our answer to even when he answers our prayers? Because that's what the previous verse was. I won't get into the story and the practical effect of that in a minute, but get that. She just came to the prophet because her son died, and she needs a miracle so that her son might live. And just like that Roman centurion that came up to Jesus and said, my boy is dying, he's sick, but I know, don't come with me. I know that if you were just to say the word, that he would be healed. That's sort of the interaction they just had. She couldn't know what was going to happen. She just interacted with him, and he just sent somebody to go heal her son in the middle of the answer of prayer. Do you still need to not leave your God? Because after the prayer was answered, the son hadn't been risen yet, but the word went forth, the command went forth. And after the command for the answering of her prayer, as the Lord liveth and as thy soul liveth, I will not leave thee. This is the heart of the church that he's trying to draw out from his people. So, the story continues. It's verse 31, and Gehazi passed on before them and laid the staff upon the face of the child, but there was neither voice nor hearing. Wherefore he went again to meet him and told him, saying, the child is not awakened. We've got two things we have to learn from the fact that Gehazi couldn't raise the child from the dead. One, we find out in subsequent chapters that Gehazi wasn't as righteous of a man as being the servant of the prophet would lead you to believe. That there was a large part of Gehazi that was in this in it with the prophet for the prophet. He was in it for what he got out of it. All right, and we know this because a couple of chapters ahead, Elisha did some miracles, and the person who received the miracles wanted to pay to bless Elisha for having done them, and he says, "No, go your way." And Gehazi then chases him back and says, "Oh, my master changed his mind. If you would pay me this amount," and gets leprosy for his trouble. But we find that the person that is in this for the glory or for the cash or for anything other than I'm with my God and I'm the voice of my God. I'm the one who ministers through the obedience from what my God says. He works through me, and that's just a joy. That's not where he was coming from. And so he was not one that was able to work the ministry of the Lord. And as somebody who was not coming with the Spirit of the Lord, he was coming with the rod. He was coming with that symbol of the law. And he was coming to use no Spirit of God, but the law of God. And we find out that brings forth no life. That no life comes from the law without the Spirit. It's the Spirit that makes alive. It's the law that kills. And so, if we have to go back through and preach through Galatians, how the law, while it brings a man to the cross, is not what saves him. This staff is something that could not raise this boy. Just as you could not be saved by the law, it was something that was used. And it's also an interesting parallel how the one who uses the law in a way that does not lead to salvation is always the person that has something to gain from it from himself, whether it be power, control, money. That if there is no Spirit of God, then see that the Spirit of God uses the law to bring to the cross to bring redemption. But a fallen man seeking his own glory, power, fame, money, whatever else he's trying to get, uses the law, his own self-righteousness, position, image. It doesn't really matter what your lust is. No, that man that uses the law always uses it to keep down and can never and will never bring life. Verse 32, coming up on my hour. And when Elisha was come into the house, behold, the child was dead, and laid upon his bed. He went in therefore, and shut the door upon them twain, and prayed unto the Lord. And he went up, and lay upon the child, and put his mouth upon his mouth, and his eyes upon his eyes. And as he stretched his hands, and he stretched himself upon the child, and the flesh and the child waxed warm. And we've got another divergent thing in how people treat God. Because if you were to go back and look and study this from certain Hebrew perspectives, it gets very comic booky very fast. Because Elisha is a man, sized as a man is. The child is a child, sized as a child is. So to be able to put mouth on mouth, eyes on eyes, hands on hands, and lay on him, the magical version of this says somehow he shrunk down and he became this magic wizard that sort of did something and controlled the environment around him, and that's lunacy. That's trying to replace the life and power of God with some unnatural power of man. That's not what's going on here. What's going on here is a picture type of Philippians 2. How he commands the church to be like Christ. Let this mind be in you, which was also in Christ Jesus, who being in the form of God, thought it not robbery to be equal with God, but made himself of no reputation, made himself small, like a child who made himself of no reputation and took upon the form of a servant and was made in the likeness of men. And being found in fashion as a man, he humbled himself and became obedient unto death, even the death of the cross. Wherefore God hath highly exalted him and given him a name which is above every name, that in the name of Jesus every knee should bow, of things in heaven and things in earth and things under the earth, and that every tongue should confess that Jesus Christ is Lord, to the glory of the Father. We're in the middle of Christmas. Imagine the God of the universe who created everything comes and takes the form of man. All right? No, it's been a long time since I've used that example, but that's sort of like me if I just decided to take the form of a guinea pig. In terms of higher order of creature, this is like all of a sudden I just decide to change my form and become guinea pig. Ludicrous is not even the right word to describe that. Right? That's what he did for us. The amount that he came down to make himself in the form of a man is, from a God perspective, as ludicrous as me going into the form of the guinea pig, because of it's just lower order. Why would I lower myself that much, change my nature that much to become in that form? That's what he did for us. He took a form that was so much lower, and not just lower, but corrupted. He didn't take on the corruption till the cross, but he took on this form. Is that not enough? That he humbled himself that much. But not only did he humble himself to take on the image of man, he started out as a baby. He started out as the smallest one of us. That's Christmas. That's what we celebrate, right? But not because our Savior is a baby, because our Savior came as a baby. He came and he lived in every way, in every form as us. Can you imagine anything? If you were to look at biology from an evolutionary biologist perspective, humans are weird because we're the only ones that finish gestation outside the womb. Right? All of the other mammals and other creatures, they're more developed when they give birth so that the horses can walk and all of the other things. We finish our development outside the womb. Right? Well, describe just the strangeness of that. Can you imagine the God of the universe coming down and being that small? He humbled him. That's what he's talking about. Here he is. He's got the dead child, and he doesn't just pray over him or touch him on the forehead or just keep his distance and ask God to do something for him. He comes down and mouth to mouth, eyes to eyes, holding of hands, and lays on him and gets as personal as humanly possible with something so much beneath him, so much smaller than him, so much in stature, in position, in life, in position before God and job. Would be like if the President of the United States came and lived like a pauper. The disparity, so much. I'll finish it in 2 Kings 4. And he went up, and verse 34, and lay upon the child, and put his mouth upon his mouth, and his eyes upon his eyes, and his hands upon his hands. And he stretched himself upon the child, and the flesh of the child waxed warm. Then he returned and walked in the house to and fro, and went up and stretched himself upon him. I believe this is picture type of the fact that what you go through, he went through. Everything that you've had to deal with, all of the pain, all of the death, all of the destruction, all of the sorrow, all of the wounds, everything that you've gone through, he bore on the cross. And if there's one thing you know about the cross, it is not a private death. He did not take on your sorrow and your suffering and your death privately behind closed doors. Elisha came out of the room, and I can't imagine he was doing anything other than pacing, praying, and the weight of what's going on in him. And he's in in front of this Shunammite woman and her husband, or not her husband, I don't even know if the husband knows at this point. No, but he's in front of this Shunammite woman just as grieved and affected and before the throne of God as her. He's with her in it. He's not just going to fix the problem and coming back. He's going to raise the son, but be with the woman. And he returned and walked up to the house to and fro and went up and stretched himself upon him. And the child sneezed 7 times and he opened his eyes. Everything that was just in there just came out and he was alive. And so were you if you were born again. There was a time you went from being dead to being alive. There's a time you went from having been created a living creature, a living spirit, and had died, and then had been raised to life again as a newborn child of God. And he called Gehazi and said, "Call this Shunammite." So he called her, and when she was come in unto him, he said, "Take up thy son." And then she went in and fell at his feet, and bowed herself to the ground, and took up her son, and went out, knowing that her God is not a liar. Not just that she was rewarded with a son, but she was in the presence of God. That her son would live, but that all of the grief and sorrow that she had to bear in all of her history was no longer born alone, and was no longer a traumatic thing from her past, but a healed walk through with the presence of God. And now she was, as she presented herself in the beginning, as a woman with an overflowing abundance to provide for others, how much more now?